So we just heard the journey started 25 years ago with static sites in Perl. And the latest, greatest is building static sites 25 years later. Static is the new dynamic. So building static sites in JavaScript. So that's a big improvement to Perl. Static website builder. So how do you build today websites? So the biggest today, PHP rules. So WordPress has 25% of the market share, millions of websites. And a typical PHP or a WordPress Drupal Joomla setup, it has a database, an application server, PHP, and a web server. And on every request, it builds your page on the fly. So that's how you usually build websites. And there's the latest fashion is to go back to 1999 or not the 50s, but 25 years, and you build a website. You don't need a database. You don't need an application server. You just need serverless. Everything gets built ahead of time on your build machine using, for example, JavaScript, and then you just upload your HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or media files, graphics, and so on. And so in 99, the biggest Dreamweaver front page composer. And now the big question is, what are the big static site builders of today? Who's number one? Who's the biggest, most popular? Who's number two, number three? Any chance? So the question is at the end. So Hello Gatsby is not the biggest, but it's growing. This is 3 weeks old, 3,000 stars. Now it has 5,000 stars. It's a top 10 static site builder. It's using React.js and JavaScript, of course. Everything is a web component. And it's on GitHub. If anybody is a designer, they are looking for a logo. So it's so new. And the developer, Kyle Matthew is the developer. He had a startup. And for his startup, the startup was using, of course, JavaScript and React. And he needed for his startup Rocket something. And then he had a project or a product. And he needed, of course, for his project and for his startup, he needed a web page. And so what he did, he built his own static site builder. And because he wanted to build it in JavaScript and using web components in React. So all it started. And he also started blogging 15 years ago, or 10 years ago, 2006, first blog. So I encourage you to start blogging. It's fantastic. And his blog, of course, build yourself a blog in JavaScript with React in 5 minutes. He did it. Now you can use, but Kyle Messer. So just a tiny site, static. So static is not, there's lots of static in the world. So if you have a newspaper, this building, the architecture is static. And anybody knows just a trivia, the Great Gatsby, when was the last update of the novel? So it's static. So it's 1925, the Roaring Twenties in New York City, Jazz Age. That's the novel. There was a movie. Anyway, let's get started. It's super easy. Of course, it's JavaScript, Node.js. And to install, you just say node install Gatsby. And then you have to wait 1 hour, download 2,000 packages. It's, but you get everything. Everything, you get Webpack, React Router. Everything is included, the latest, greatest stuff. Yeah, and then Gatsby, it has a command line, but then of course you do everything in JavaScript. And the command line, it's pretty simple. You can create a new quick starter site with new. Then you have the develop server with develop, and then of course you build the build command to build your site. And to get started to build a new site, what you do, you have similar to like a WordPress theme or the Jekyll starter themes. Just a GitHub repo is like a pre-made website site up with a theme. And the Gatsby, if you go to the Gatsby.js organization, there's a starter blog, there's a kitchen sink that shows everything you can do. And then there's also, it's fantastic, static sites are fantastic and used for everything. For example, Facebook is using a static site builder for the React documentation or the Bootstrap documentation, everything Microsoft, Google, everything is using for that documentation. on GitHub, everybody is using static site builder. So there's a Gatsby documentation starter site too. But if you say Gatsby new blog, and then you give it the starter, it's the same as just cloning the Gatsby starter blog repo. Then you do, of course, node install to get the whole machinery, and Gatsby develop, and your site is up and running. And the site we are going to I'm going to show, it's called Stay Static. It's pretty simple. It has an about page. It has a front page with the news, and then a data file with links, and a tiny blog. And I build this site 10 times, every week a new one. And let's see the JavaScript. There's the Gatsby site, live in action. That's the site, the front page. It has an about page. If I click the about page, let's see, right, about. And the news page, that's the blog posting. Super boring, but it has three main things. It has a blog postings, it has pages, and it has a data file. And now let's see how you build it. So that's the post pages. To build it, Gatsby in action. So why would you build, there are 5,000 static site builders. In 5 minutes, you can build your own. So why does anybody need the Great Gatsby? Anybody know what's the main selling? React, of course. React is fantastic. But the main selling point is hot reloading. So unfortunately, the Windows computer was not working for the setup, for the live demo. But the hot reloading means you just edit your text file with your blog posting. And if your browser is open, it will automatically refresh thanks to Webpack. And it works for CSS. It works for the configuration file. It doesn't work for adding new files. But otherwise, you don't have to refresh yourself. It will auto refresh in your browser. And there's an animated GIF on the website from Gatsby where you can see the hot reloading. But hot reloading using Webpack is a standard feature of React. So if you do React, I think anybody is using hot reloading in the development? Yeah. So now you can use it for your blog too. Live preview. Yeah. So how does it work? If you say new, that's the example site. Everything, of course, everything is a component, web component. So your HTML page is a HTML, it's called HTML web component. Then you have every Markdown, every page post is wrapped in a Markdown wrapper component. And then, of course, you can create, if you do the layout for the header, footer, linked list, or any components, you create your JavaScript React web components. So, and that's the site. You have the header, footer, and the page. And the great news is if you do a page or post, you don't have to write HTML, but you can just use plain text using, anybody knows what kind of formatting it is? Markdown. So it's just using Markdown for a link. Looks like a wiki, but it's way easier. And then if you do the meta information, it's called front matter. It's just key value pairs, title, you can pick the layout. And everything is on GitHub online if you want to browse. And if you do a post has a date, and an about page, you don't care about the date, so it doesn't have a date. But yeah, it's the same stuff, super easy to do. And Markdown and JavaScript. Anybody has a favorite Markdown library in JavaScript? So Gatsby is using Markdown it. It has 2,000 stars. And the great part about Markdown is there's a core Markdown for paragraphs, lists, but then there are lots of extensions. So you can use tables, you can use footnotes, you can use the famous fenced code blocks GitHub style with 3 backticks. And there are many more extensions. Yeah, just to show you, yeah, to do a table with the pipe, that's how easy it is to do the table. And if you want to include in your blog, if you want to include JavaScript, that's the backtick. If you use GitHub, basically there's no, if you're an academic, an academic, footnotes. You can add footnotes, super easy. Just a bracket, and then you have your academic writing. So, static sites.
You have to be academic to use footnotes.
Yeah. So, yeah, put in footnotes. That's fantastic. It works. So data files. So usually you can use a database, but most of the time these are small. Let's say you have a bank and it has 25 branches, or a coffee house with 15 branches or something. Then it's a small list, and the small list you can put in JSON. And because Gatsby is more radical, it uses JavaScript. Because JavaScript, you can use comments. In JSON, there are no comments. And in JavaScript, that's easier. You don't have to put your keys in quotes. But yeah, your data file. So this is the simple bookmark list. How you do it in Gatsby. And now the important part, you want to build your website. Everything is a React web component. And if you remember the front page, I have the linked list. So how do I do the linked list? It's super easy. You just use the links gets passed in, and then you just loop over. The loop is called functional, is called map. So the map is the for each. And then you build the HTML linked list. And if anybody knows React, so the embedded HTML is called JavaScript extension. But in React, basically, you have the HTML inside your JavaScript. And then it renders the component. And how do you use it? In your template, you use linked list, links. That's how easy it is. You put this in your page template. And the other, if you remember the front page, the other one is you want to list the first couple of news postings. To loop over your posts, Gatsby, you import the Gatsby helper to add a prefix to your link. But otherwise, you get the posts, and it's the same principle. You loop over your posts, and you do the link to. Because the link to, you use a React router, and because you're using React and Webpack, you have two options. If you build your website, you can build, or by default, it builds a single page website, which means, let's say you have 25 pages for your website. If you load the first page, it will include all your pages. And then if you turn off the internet, you can still browse to the next page, because it's a single page. Your website is a hyper-optimized single page application automatically. And to make the magic work, if you have a link that has to work offline, or you have to use link to, so it's not an HTML tag with href. That's why you have to import the Gatsby helper that gets you and this link to is just the React router. So there's nothing about Gatsby. So the master template. So if you build your master template and you want to do the includes, everything is a React web component. And how do you include components in components? You just use JavaScript. So I import component header, I import the footer. I have the class master template. It's just another template component, and I use the header and footer. And then this props children is just plain React, which means the content gets put in here. That's the page. And that's how the footer looks like. Super simple. It just has a div, and it stays static. Sample site promotion. And the header is a little more complex. It has a sophisticated table layout to go with Homage 20 years ago. Table style, and then a line right in line. Yeah, site title. And that's the header, footer. And how do you do the configuration? The site title is just key value pairs. The markup used Tom's markup language, was a GitHub co-founder. But basically, it's just like a simple version of JSON. That's how easy it is to configure. Yeah, and to summarize the Gatsby, if anybody looks at other website builders. So in Gatsby, everything is a web component. HTML templates, layout includes, use React web component. And if you want to use data files, the data files are just JavaScript. And of course, to import it. And now the great part, CSS pre-processing. You can use everything you want to use in JavaScript, PostJS or whatever. And that's the part. If you build your website, you can actually build it without JavaScript. There are two versions, as I mentioned. If you say Gatsby build, the default version is it builds a single page website. And then, of course, it has to include the React router magic. So if you browse to a different page, it doesn't really browse. It already has it loaded, and then it just shows the page. But if you turn off the single page, it's just one property, then it builds a plain old website without JavaScript, and then you have CSS. It's just static HTML. And how does the magic work is, I think we heard it today, it's called universal rendering. Because usually React, you use React in your browser, and it gets rendered in your browser. But isomorphic JavaScript application means you render your HTML on your server. And then it doesn't get built inside your browser. But Gatsby, the static site builder, that's the idea. Everything, all React components, everything gets built ahead of time. Even if you do the single page application, it gets built ahead of time, and everything gets bundled up in a single bundle.js file. And it includes, I think it doesn't include, that's the disclaimer, it doesn't include the images. So if you have lots of images, I think images get loaded on demand. It doesn't include the images in your bundle. And that's how it looks like. If you build a website, you get the index HTML, so you have nice links without configuring your web server. Style CSS, you can include style, but you don't see almost no JavaScript, but you can, of course, include as much JavaScript as you like. And the bundle.js, that's the magic. If you have the single page application, this bundle will have all your pages included, and every page you hit will include your whole website. And it's, let's say, if your page has 20K size, then the bundle you can multiply. If you have, let's say, if you have 15 pages, then you have 150K is your bundle. So it's like going live. That's a great part. If you upload your website, there are thousands of options, FTP to any, you don't need PHP, Node.js, anything, just a web server. Or you can go serverless, the new. And GitHub Pages is free. GitLab Pages is free. Search. Anybody tried Search? It's a free hosting. There it's got go live with 6 keystroke. Of course, you have npm install search, but once you have installed, you get to the public folder of your static site. You say search enter, and you have a high performance website live, content network optimized for everything, for links. Google Firebase, free tier, and many more options. Yeah, why would anybody use static? It's not like retro chic. Let's do it like 25 years ago. But faster. There's nothing faster than a static site. For example, the usual case was Obama was using WordPress for his campaign getting for president. And they used WordPress and Supercache and everything on their page. And then they switched to Jekyll, and they improved the performance like, I think 50 or 60%. But now the question is, and this was from WordPress to Jekyll. But now Hillary Clinton, anybody know Hillary Clinton? Yeah, so the website Hillary Clinton, what is she using? She's not using Jekyll anymore, but she's using a static site compiler. Anybody knows what Hillary Clinton is using today? What's the Gatsby? No, not yet. it's using Assemble, which is basically a gulp, but gulp with Assemble. It's the name of and handlebars templates, I think, might be, or nunchucks templates. They look like Django templates, but she's using JavaScript, Node.js, Assemble, gulp. It's on the list of the top 10. Yeah, why static? The most part, fast. Simple, there's nothing simpler. React might be not so simple, but everything is a web component, so that's pretty neat idea. And The other one, it's secure. How do you break HTML? Anybody wants to hack HTML site? There's no database. There is no application server. And then if you host it on Amazon S3, you just upload it again. So, and it's on a content network. Extremely hard to hack your HTML page. Yeah. And the other one is that's a downside or upside is designer nirvana is do it yourself. So you have to basically you can use whatever you like, but as you have seen in Gatsby, there are pre-made sites for quick start. But otherwise, let's say if you use WordPress, Drupal, extremely hard to build modules or themes. Compared here, if you want to use Bootstrap or whatever, there's no limitation, and there's no that you're not constrained. Like you have to do it this way or that way. So that's by static. Yeah, thanks. Let's see what I'll show you the stay static, the top 10 list. Anybody knows this site, Static Gen? It's the Ö3 hit parade. Static Gen. Of course, it's built. Anybody know it's built? It's built with middleman. So if you come tomorrow, is a presentation on middleman using in Ruby. Middleman chill bill, Austrian successful startup for accounting. But Gatsby is growing super fast. I think this is per week, so plus 160, and this is maybe it's number 10. So Metalsmith, I think was 2 or 3 weeks a month ago presentation. And then let's see, Hillary Clinton is using Assemble. If anyone knows Assemble, here it is. Basically, it's Gulp. No more grunt. That's the old version. The new version, Hillary's on the new version. And she's no longer using handlebars. She's using templates nunchucks from Mozilla. Yeah, Hillary. So, yeah, thanks. And yeah, great. And Vienna HTML, there's, if you want to follow along. That's the website.
And if you would like to render a table, for example, how would you go about it?
If you render a table, if you do it in your blog post, you can use Markdown. If you've seen the example, you don't like the pipes. Yeah, you can always use HTML, or of course it's JavaScript. The Markdown, you can create your own extension and invent your own table syntax. So but it's a great thing, the pipe, because the idea of Markdown is to make it as simple as possible. And if you look at the text, it's beautiful. You don't see the Markdown. That's why it's called markup. It's invisible. And this table is called pipe tables. But there's a Markdown, it doesn't have it built in, or GitHub, but the real Markdown, the big ones, they have called simple table. And in simple table, you don't have pipes. You just line up. So yeah, it's called simple table Markdown extension. That is tables without pipes that exists. Yeah. But that's a good idea. Table is still, there are different versions. There's a grid table, simple table, pipe table. These are the 3 versions.
There's actually a library that converts Markdown to React components that then you can use in your.
Yeah, that's another option. You can build a React table component and use this one, or you can just use HTML. But yeah, you can use build your React table component too. Sure. Yeah.
So you said that React components get compiled to static HTML, and that's the server-side rendered part. Can you then sort of do what you usually do in normal application, where you can use your React component to find sort of 2 means the experience?
Yeah, the thing is, the Gatsby, it's using React, and so every React component is a React component.
But it does like all the, when you render React on the server, it calculates the checksum or stuff, and then
So if you don't, I think if you don't include the Gatsby helpers or something, usually your React component should be reusable. But the idea of Gatsby is you want to, everything is on the server, pre-rendered.
I guess what I'm saying is
But it's just a React component, so of course it builds in the browser.
You have to upload it every time, right?
But if you don't use the static server side, you don't need Gatsby. You can do your plain vanilla React application. So Gatsby, the idea of Gatsby is it just adds some little stuff to React. So you have the server-side rendering and the Markdown integration for free, and includes Webpack, so it's a pre-made package. But it doesn't. There's no magic. It's still everything is React.
yeah, I guess there is a way. There is a built-in way to kind of avoid re-rendering when you then go on the client and you hook up, the client-side React application on already existing Markdown. The problem with that market application is that when then you use the same stuff in the client is that they re-render thing.
Yeah, in this case, this is static. There's never going to be a re-render on the browser. It's 100% server-side rendered. There's no. That's the idea of the static side. You have no rendering of React components in your browsers ever. It's all on the server. That's why you use it for websites, for blogs, documentation, and.
But I guess the question was more like, can you build a static website that also includes basically a client-side web application? That's the.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, of course. You can include every HTML page. You build your HTML page and you can put in whatever you want, but then you don't have to include it to your Gatsby build. You just link to it or you add it. You copy it in. But
Can you say these components should just be rendered on the build during build time, and other components are really there in the client-side application?
For now, the Gatsby is just getting started, or not. It's 1 year old, and it's getting a new version. For now, it's not like all these features you are talking about. So for now, it's optimized for building blogs, documentation sites, or whatever. And then if you know React, I think it's easy to extend. But there's no the documentation. React Gatsby doesn't have a website. So now just 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Kyle Matthews, he's working full time. So his startup was a complete failure. So he bombed. But the great part is Gatsby survived. So that's the pivot or something. So the new idea is his new startup he's working full time on Gatsby. So you will see. And I forgot to mention, yeah. And there are options. There are different static site builders, Phenomenomic, Leo. So there are other static site builders using React too. That's very fair. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for you.
Thank you for watching this talk. Down below, you can find our channel, ViennaJS, where you can find a lot of different videos about front-end and back-end JavaScript. And feel free to subscribe.